Welcome to part 2 of the Georgia Indictment, where I'll be continuing reading the acts of racketeering activity and overt acts in furtherance of the conspiracy. We left off at Act 43, and we will continue reading with Act 44. So, here we are. And I'll be making some brief abbreviations. For example, the very first sentence of Act 44, on or about the 8th day of December 2020, Donald John Trump. Instead, I'll be saying on the 8th of December 2020, Donald Trump, and making other slight abbreviations for brevity and clarity going forward. Act 44. On or about the 8th of December 2020, Donald Trump and John Charles Eastman placed a telephone call to Republican National Committee Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel to request her assistance gathering certain individuals to meet and cast electoral votes for Donald Trump on December 14, 2020 in certain states, despite the fact that Donald Trump lost the November 3, 2020 presidential election in those states. This was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 45. On or about the 8th of December 2020, Michael A. Roman sent a text message to unindicted co-conspirator Individual 4, stating that he had spoken to Misty Hampton and asked unindicted co-conspirator Individual 4 to, quote, get, end quote, Misty Hampton to attend a hearing before Georgia House of Representatives Governmental Affairs Committee on December 10, 2020. This was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 46. On or about the 9th of December 2020, Kenneth Chesebro wrote a memorandum titled, quote, Statutory Requirements for December 14 Electoral Votes, end quote, to James R. Trupis, an attorney associated with the Trump campaign. The memorandum provides details, state-specific instructions for how Trump's presidential elector nominees in Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin would meet and cast electoral votes for Donald Trump on December 14th, 2020, despite the fact that Donald Trump lost the November 3rd presidential election in those states. This was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 47. On or about the 10th of December 2020, Kenneth Chesebro sent an email to Georgia Republican Party Chairman David Schaefer and unindicted co-conspirator Individual 9, Kenneth Chesebro, stated in the email that certain individuals associated with the Trump campaign asked him, quote, to help coordinate with the other 5 contested states, to help with logistics of the electors in other states hopefully joining and casting their votes on Monday, end quote. This was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. On or about the 10th of December 2020, Kenneth Chesebro sent an email with attached documents to David James Schaefer and unindicted co-conspirator individuals 9, 10, and 11, whose identities are known to the grand jury. The documents were to be used by the Trump presidential elector nominees in Georgia for the purpose of casting electoral votes for Donald Trump on December 14th, 2020, despite the fact that Donald Trump lost the election for Georgia. This was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 49. On or about the 10th of December 2020, Kenneth Chesebro sent an email with attached documents to Arizona Republican Party Executive Director Greg Staffston and others. The documents were to be used by Trump presidential elector nominees in Arizona for the purpose of casting electoral votes for Donald Trump on December 14, 2020, despite the fact that Donald Trump lost the presidential election in Arizona. Act 50. On or about the 10th of December 2020, Kenneth Chesebro sent an email to Republican Party of Wisconsin Chairman Brian Schimming with proposed language for documents to be used by Trump presidential elector nominees in Wisconsin for the purpose of casting electoral votes for Donald Trump on December 14, 2020, despite the fact that Donald Trump lost the presidential election in Wisconsin. This was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 51. On the 10th of December 2020, Kenneth Chesebro sent an email to Nevada Republican Party Vice Chairman Jim DeGraffenreid. Kenneth Chesebro stated in the email that Rudy Giuliani and other individuals associated with the Trump campaign asked him to, quote, to reach out to you and the other Nevada electors to run point on a plan to have all the Trump-Pence electors and all 6 contested states meet and transmit their votes to Congress on Monday, December 14th, end quote. This was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 52. On or about the 10th of December 2020, Kenneth Chesebro sent an email with attached documents to Jim DeGraffenreid. The documents were to be used by Trump presidential elector nominees in Nevada for the purpose of casting electoral votes for Donald John Trump on December 14, 2020, despite the fact that Donald Trump lost the November presidential election in Nevada. This was an overt act and furthers the conspiracy. Act 52. On or about the 10th of December 2020, Kenneth Chesebro sent an email with attached documents to Republican Party of Pennsylvania General Counsel Thomas W. King III. The documents were to be used by Trump presidential elector nominees in Pennsylvania for the purpose of casting electoral votes for Donald Trump for December 14th, despite the fact that Donald Trump lost the November presidential election in Pennsylvania. This was an overt act and furthers the conspiracy. Act 54. On or about the 10th of December 2020 and the 14th of December, James Schaefer contacted unindicted co-conspirator Individual 2 by telephone and discussed unindicted co-conspirator Individual 2's attendance at the December 14th, 2020 meeting of Trump presidential elector nominees in Fulton County, Georgia. This was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 55. On the 10th of December 2020, Rudolph Giuliani and Ray Stallings Smith III committed the felony offense of solicitation of violation of oath by public officer in violation of OCGA 1647 and 1610-1 in Fulton County, Georgia, by unlawfully soliciting, requesting, and importuning certain public officers then serving as elected members of the Georgia House of Representatives and present at the House Governmental Affairs Committee meeting, including Representatives Sean Blackman, John Burns, Barry Fleming, Todd Jones, B. Nguyen, Mary Margaret Oliver, Alan Powell, Renita Shannon, Robert Trammell, Scott Turner, and Bruce Williamson to engage in conduct constituting the felony offense of violation of oath by public officer by unlawfully appointed presidential electors of Georgia in willful and intentional violation of the terms of the oath of said persons as prescribed by law, with intent that said persons engage in such conduct. This was an overt act and furthers the conspiracy. Act 56. On the 10th of December 2020, Rudy Giuliani committed the felony offense of false statements and writings in violation of OCGA 1610-20 in Fulton County, Georgia, by knowingly, willfully, and unlawfully making at least one of the following false statements and representations to members of the Georgia House of Representatives present at a House Governmental Affairs Committee meeting. 1. That it is quite clear from the State Farm Arena video of November 3, 2020, that the Fulton County election workers were stealing votes and that the Georgia officials were covering up a crime in plain sight. 2. That at the State Farm Arena November 3, 2020, Democratic officials, quote, got rid of all the reporters, all the observers, anyone that couldn't be trusted, end quote, used the excuse of a water main break, cleared out the voting area, and then, quote, went about their dirty, crooked business, end quote. 3. That between 12,000 and 24,000 ballots were illegally counted by Fulton County election workers at State Farm Arena on November 3, 2020. 4. That in Michigan there were 700,000 more ballots counted than were sent out to voters in December 3, 2020 presidential election, which was accounted for by quadruple counting ballots. 5. That Ruby Freeman, Shay Moss, and an unidentified man were, quote, quite obviously surreptitiously passing around USB ports as if they were vials of heroin or cocaine, end quote, at State Farm Arena to be used, quote, to infiltrate the Crooked Dominion voting machines, end quote. 6. That 96,600 mail-in ballots were counted in November presidential election in Georgia, despite there being no record of those ballots having been returned to county elections office. Such statements being within the jurisdiction of the Office of the Georgia Secretary of State and Georgia Bureau of Investigation, departments and agencies of state government, and county and city law enforcement agencies. This was an act of racketeering under OCGA 1614-3-5A XXII and an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 57. On the 11th of December 2020, David Schaefer reserved room 216 at the Georgia State Capitol in Fulton County, Georgia, for the December 14, 2020 meeting of Trump presidential elector nominees in Fulton County, Georgia. This was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 58. For the 11th of December 2020, Kenneth Chesebro sent an email to Jim DeGraffenreid that stated, quote, The purpose of having electoral votes sent in Congress is to provide the opportunity to debate the election irregularities in Congress, and to keep alive the possibility that the votes could be flipped to Trump. End quote. This was an overt act and furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 59. For the 11th of December 2020, Kenneth Chesebro sent an email with attached documents to Greg Steffson and others. The documents were to be used by Trump presidential electoral nominees in Arizona for the purpose of casting electoral votes for Donald Trump on December 14, 2020, despite the fact that Donald Trump lost the presidential election in Arizona. This was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 60. For the 11th of December 2020, Kenneth Chesebro sent an email with attached documents to Michael A. Roman and other individuals associated with the Trump campaign. The documents were to be used by Trump presidential elector nominees in Nevada for the purpose of casting electoral votes for Donald Trump on December 14, 2020, despite the fact that Donald Trump lost the November election in Nevada. This was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 61. On the 11th of December 2020, Kenneth Chesebro sent an email with attached documents to Michael A. Roman, unindicted co-conspirator Individual 5, and others. The documents were to be used by Trump presidential elector nominees in Georgia for the purpose of casting electoral votes for Donald Trump on December 14, 2020, despite the fact that Donald Trump lost the November election in Georgia. This was an overt act and furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 62. On the 12th of December 2020, David Schaefer contacted unindicted co-conspirator Individual 12 and discussed unindicted co-conspirator Individual 12's attendance at the December 14, 2020 meeting of Trump presidential elector nominees in Fulton County, Georgia. This was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. On the 12th of December 2020, Michael A. Roman sent an email to unindicted co-conspirators Individual 4 and Individual 7 to the grand jury and to other individuals associated with the Trump campaign. Sorry, I misspoke, not to the grand jury. In the email, Michael A. Roman stated, quote, "I need a tracker for the electors," end quote, and instructed individuals associated with the Trump campaign to populate entries on a shared spreadsheet listing Trump presidential elector nominees in Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, Nevada, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. The entries on the spreadsheet include contact information for the Trump presidential elector nominees, whether the Trump presidential elector nominees had been contacted, and whether the Trump presidential elector nominees had confirmed that they would attend the December 14, 2020 meetings of Trump presidential elector nominees in their respective states, despite the fact that Donald Trump lost the November election in those states. This was an overt act and furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 64. On the 12th of December 2020, Kenneth Chesebro met with Brian Schimming and discussed the December 14th, 2020 meeting of Trump presidential election nominees in Wisconsin. Rudy Giuliani joined the meeting by telephone and stated that the media should not be notified of the December 14th, 2020 meeting of Trump presidential elector nominees in Wisconsin. These were overt acts and furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 65. On the 12th of December 2020, Michael Roman instructed an individual associated with the Trump campaign to distribute certain information related to the December 14, 2020 meetings of Trump presidential elector nominees in Georgia, Arizona, Michigan, Nevada, New Mexico, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin to unindicted co-conspirator Individual 4 and to other individuals associated with the Trump campaign. This was an overt act and furthers the conspiracy. Act 66. On the 12th of December 2020, unindicted co-conspirator Individual 4 sent an email to Michael Roman and David Schaefer with updates on the progress of organizing the December 14, 2020 meeting of Trump presidential elector nominees in Fulton County, Georgia. The email stated which elector nominees had confirmed they would attend the meeting, that other individuals had been secured in case some of the elector nominees refused to participate in the meeting, that Georgia legislators had been contacted to ensure access to the Georgia Capitol, and that David Schaefer had reserved room 216 for the meeting. This was an overt act and furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 67. On or about the 12th day of December 2020, David James Schaefer sent an email to unindicted co-conspirator Individual 4, advising them to, quote, touch base with each of the Trump presidential elector nominees in Georgia in advance of the December 14th meeting to confirm their attendance. This was an overt act and furthers the conspiracy. Act 68. On the 12th of December 2020, unindicted co-conspirator Individual 4 sent a text message with contact information for unindicted co-conspirator Individual 8 and Georgia Senator Brandon Beach to Michael Roman for the purpose of providing the contact information to Rudy Giuliani. This was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. On December 13th, 2020, Kenneth Chesebro sent an email with attached documents to Michael Roman. The documents were to be used by Trump presidential elector nominees in New Mexico for the purpose of casting electoral votes for Donald Trump on the December 14th, 2020. Despite the fact that Donald Trump lost the November election in New Mexico, this was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 70. On the 13th of December 2020, Kenneth Chesebro sent an email to Rudy Giuliani with the subject, quote, "Privileged and confidential, brief notes on President of the Senate strategy," end quote. In the email, Kenneth Chesebro outlined multiple strategies for disrupting and delaying the joint session of Congress on January 6, 2021, the day prescribed by law for counting the votes cast by the duly elected and qualified presidential electors from Georgia and the other states. In the email, Kenneth Chesebro stated that the strategies outlined by him were, quote, "preferable to allowing the Electoral Count Act to operate by its terms," end quote. This was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 71. On the 13th of December 2020, Kenneth Chesebro sent an email with attached documents to Michael Roman and unindicted co-conspirator Individual 4. The documents were to be used by Trump presidential elector nominees in Georgia for the purpose of casting electoral votes for Donald Trump on the December 14th, 2020, despite the fact that Donald Trump lost the November election in Georgia. This was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 72. On the 13th of December 2020, Kenneth Chesebro sent an email to Michael Roman and unindicted co-conspirator Individual 4 and stated that Rudy Giuliani, quote, "wants to keep this quiet until after all voting is done," end quote, in reference to the December 14th, 2020 meeting of Trump presidential elector nominees in Fulton County, Georgia. This was an overt act and furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 73. On the 13th of December 2020, David Schaefer sent a text message to unindicted co-conspirator Individual 4 and stated that unindicted co-conspirator Individual 8 would attend the December 14, 2020 meeting of Trump presidential elector nominees in Fulton County, Georgia, in the place of a Trump presidential elector nominee who refused to participate in the meeting. This was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 74. On or about the 13th day of December 2020, unindicted co-conspirator Individual 9, whose identity is known to the grand jury, sent a text message to David James Schaefer that confirmed that he and unindicted co-conspirator Individual 13, whose identity is known to the grand jury, would attend the December 14th, 2020 meeting of Trump presidential elector nominees in Fulton County, Georgia. This was an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Act 75. On the 14th of December 2020, Donald Trump calls to be tweeted from the Twitter account @RealDonaldTrump, quote, "What a fool Governor @BrandCamp Georgia of Georgia is. Could have been so easy, but now we have to do it the hard way. Demand this clown call a special session and open up signature verification now. Otherwise, could be a bad day for two great senators on January 5th, end quote. This was an overt act and furthers the conspiracy. Act 76. On the 14th of December 2020, David Schaefer sent a text message to unindicted co-conspirator Individual 4 that stated, quote, "Listen, tell them to go straight to room 216 to avoid drawing attention to what we are doing," end quote, in reference to the December 14th, 2020 meeting of Trump presidential elector nominees in Fulton County, Georgia. This was an overt act and furthers the conspiracy. Act 77. On the 14th of December 2020, Michael Roman sent an email to unindicted co-conspirators Individual 4 and 7, whose identities are known to the grand jury, and stated, quote, "Please send me an update as soon as the state electoral college has adjourned and all paperwork is secured," end quote. This was an overt act and furthers the conspiracy. Act 78. On or about the 14th day of December 2020, Ray Stallings Smith III and David James Schaefer encouraged certain individuals present at the December 14th, 2020 meeting of Trump presidential elector nominees in Fulton County, Georgia, to sign a document titled, quote, "Certificate of the Votes of the 2020 Electors from Georgia," end quote. This was an overt act and furthers the conspiracy. As we approach minute 20, we leave off with Act 79, and we are on page 40, and I believe there are 98 pages in total, so almost halfway, and we're still on the very first count, which is the RICO charge. So I leave it here. I hope to soon upload part 3, and I hope you'll come back for that. And I hope you found this informative. Please like, share, subscribe. I'm a very new channel with basically nothing, so I'd appreciate any help you can give me. Thank you. Bye.